we're really lucky to have with us this week Matt LeMay, who I've known for a few years now. But I
Few
feel like
years,
this is
yeah.
our first professional engagement, which is really exciting.
Totally.
So Matt is a product consultant who's worked with people like Google, Spotify, Mailchimp. He's also written a couple of books, Product Management in Practice, and more recently, Impact First Product Teams. And today he's going to be talking about, there is a copy of the book. I've got a couple of copies of the book. I should have had my copies ready so I could kind of flash them up as well. Um, but today, Matt's going to be talking about how every product team can drive business impact, how it's every product team's responsibility to justify their costs, like actually move the numbers that matter. Um, but I'll let him explain all about that. I'll be watching the chat. If you do have, well, we'll both be watching the chat. If you do have questions, stick them in the chat, and I'm sure Matt's going to take a few questions at the end as well. So, Matt, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ed. It's so nice to see all of you here today. Thanks for taking some time out of your Tuesday to talk about business impact. I don't know why this struck me, but I'm looking at the chat and I see Russell. You mentioned that you're had presented Doctor Doctor, and I was like, is that Doctor Doctor the abbreviation and the full word the same format as the '80s rock band Mister Mister? And it turns out it is in fact the same format, MR Mister. So I like to think that Doctor Doctor is an all Doctor cover cover of the band Mister Mister. Anyhow, that's how my brain works. Welcome to it. I'm so happy to be here with you today. As Ed mentioned, I've worked with a lot of different companies. My passion is helping focus product teams on work that matters because there is always more to focus on than there is time to do it. And it is really, really easy to get bogged down in doing a lot of things that might feel important or feel like we are being incentivized or we're being yelled at or whatever. But focusing on what really matters to the business, as we're going to discuss, is one of the most important things we can do as product people. And shockingly to me, having researched this book, it actually makes for happier product people too, which I was not expecting, but it actually kind of makes sense. So periodically, when I'm, through doing some consulting work and I notice a theme, I write a book. I wrote one about Agile, which let us never speak of it again because I don't ever want to talk to people about Agile again. I wrote Product Management in Practice, which I'm still quite proud of. It's in its second edition. And I this year published Impact First Product Teams. Um, Funny story, this book was originally going to be a book about enterprise service design because I felt like over the last couple of years, I've noticed that we're pretty good at breaking down big things into small things, but we struggle a lot more to take those small things and add them back up into something that makes sense. So I started kind of writing out some stuff, and I realized pretty quickly that A, I am not a service designer and would not have known what I was talking about. And B, the examples and stories I have to share, some of which I will share with you today, that involve teams doing really incredible work at the enterprise service design level, all have to do with the way they set their goals. It all has to do with how they defined and measured and tracked against success. So I'm going to share some stories about that with you, and we are going to talk about it. Gratuitous by my book, GIF, for anyone who remembers the short-lived Fox animated sitcom The Critic. I certainly do. So the first thing I want to do is acknowledge that like it's tough times out there right now. It is weird, tough times in product world. There is a genuine sense of tenuousness I feel in our industry that I certainly didn't feel 5, 10 years ago. I felt for a while, as I suspect many of us did, that once you've gotten yourself in the door as a product manager, you're like, aha, I've won the prize. I am product manager. Um, Now nothing bad can ever happen, but that's not unfortunately how it's worked. I think for a while, we as product people had the luxury of being really focused on how we do our work and less focused on why we do our work. which is to say, I've spent a lot of time talking with folks about what is the best framework to use for prioritization, what is the right way to do this ritual, what is the right framework. This is part of why I never want to talk about Agile ever again. But I think at the end of the day, we are rediscovering this truth that product management is ultimately a business accountable role. It is our job to make sure that the things our teams build actually deliver value for the business and its customers. So, the first question I ask in my book, and the first question I'm going to bring to you today, is this: if you were the CEO of the company, would you fully fund this team? So if you were personally accountable for the market level success of your company, would you look at your team and say this team is a good investment? Would you be willing to sit in a room with the CFO, with the board of directors, see the cost of your team as a line item on a spreadsheet and say, yes, I can vouch for and explain how this particular team is a good investment for this business at this time? And I promise you that if you, as a member of your own team, cannot answer this question, that the people who are actually looking at your team as a line item on a spreadsheet certainly cannot answer this question. I'm happy to talk about this more in the Q&A, but twice I have brought this question to a team, and that team has actually chosen to meaningfully repurpose itself. In one case, actually disband itself because they said, we could do everything we've been given to do. We could achieve all of our intermediate objectives. We could do all the initiatives the business has given us. We can focus on exactly the parts of the product we've been told to focus on. And we still don't think it would be worth the investment that the business has made in this team. Now, I use this example because I think oftentimes as product people, we get stuck in the middle of this relationship between the success of the business and the work we do. We spend a lot of our time worried about whether our initiatives align with our strategy, whether our objectives ladder up to our bets. It is really easy, especially in a middle upper management context, to add more and more and more stuff to the middle and to get really particular about how we do these things in the middle. But at the end of the day, again, when your team is being evaluated as a line item on a spreadsheet, those things in the middle don't really matter that much anymore, right? If your strategy is not delivering enough impact for the business, that's still a problem. If you are working towards an objective, but that objective is cascaded down so many levels that it no longer has any coherent connection to what the business really cares about, then you can achieve your objectives. You can execute against your strategy and still not be a team that is a good investment for the business. So I wrote this book in the hopes of helping people make this direct connection, saying, regardless of how your company does strategy, regardless of whether you do objectives or bets or initiatives or all of them and they don't make sense, don't drive yourself to the brink of madness by trying to align all these bits in the middle. Really focus on how the work you're doing can draw a direct line to what the business really cares about. And when you can do this, then you can make sure that your team is a good investment in ways that company leadership actually understand. So, being familiar with Ed's work and with Hustle Badger and these great, really actionable templates and resources, I wanted to take a different approach today and tell a story about a team I worked with, and then kind of reverse engineer from that story. What are the things we can take away and the things we can start applying to our work right away? So I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories from my consulting career. This is from my work with Mailchimp. I spent 3 years working with Mailchimp leading up to their acquisition by Intuit, and it was an absolute joy. I worked with so many amazing, brilliant people. The company was in such an interesting position, and I had this incredible luxury of working across the entire organization. So I met with C-suite, I met with I see product managers. I met with researchers. I met with writers. I met with marketers. I met with engineers. I got this incredible opportunity to see this organization from kind of every possible angle. And there's one story that really sticks out to me about, again, how this company was able to do really amazing stuff at the enterprise level. So when I started working with Mailchimp, they were in this interesting position that a lot of companies find themselves in or found themselves in, where they were growing from being a single product company to being a platform company. So for a long time, Mailchimp was primarily associated with email marketing, still is. But they said, we really see some opportunities. People have this amazing data. We have this amazing list of subscribers across different mailing lists. We should be able to be an all-in-one marketing solution for folks. And of course, Mailchimp was not the only business that was looking to expand from where they sat to become a multi-product all-in-one marketing platform, right? HubSpot was doing it, Squarespace was doing it. There was really this expansive race to see who could provide the most value and kind of be the platform that folks lock in their marketing to. So they had done a reorg, kind of going into the Spotify domain model. They had set some initiatives where folks were trying to build out these new features. They had done some bets. They had some different ways of structuring and kind of giving teams different areas to focus on. About halfway through my work with them, my friend Natalia Williams, who wrote the foreword to Product Management in Practice, she was promoted from VP Product to CPO. And she took a look around and she said, I love what we're doing, but I want to make sure we don't lose the fundamentals, right? I want to make sure that as we add these new features, we don't make it harder for people to get value out of the product. So she said to the entire product organization, I want you to keep working on what you're working on, right? Keep focused. You have initiatives, you have things to work on. But as you work on these things, I want the number of users who start engaging with MailChimp and complete sending that first email. I want that conversion rate to go up a specific amount by the end of the year. Because my biggest fear right now is that we are going to add more stuff, and that stuff is going to stand in the way of people getting value from our platform. So, what I want to see is an ambitious, measurable increase in the number of people who start signing up with MailChimp and who finish that sign up flow and send that email. This is going to be what I'm looking at across the whole product org to know if we're doing this right. So there was one particular product manager I worked with by the name of Carrie Tian. She revealed her identity in a LinkedIn post, so I can say who it was. And she looked at this and she said, "Okay, it's time to figure out where people are getting stuck. Let's get some research going." So she worked with a user researcher and she found 5 places in between that initial contact with Mailchimp and that first email where people were getting stuck. One of them, this is really interesting, I think. Right here, you see that yellow button that says buy now. That used to say add to cart. So at one point, when you bought your MailChimp plan, you had to go through a whole cart flow, even though the majority of people were simply buying a single plan rather than actually adding multiple plans to their cart. So Carrie found these 5 places where people were getting stuck. She did a really good job looking at proprietary data at scale and also doing some qual research, finding these are the 5 places. We mapped it out. If we fix these 5 things, I think we can achieve this specific time-bound, ambitious goal that our CPO gave us. So she gathered all the product managers at Mailchimp into a room. I was really lucky I walked into this room. I happened to be on site in Atlanta and I was like, "Ooh, what's happening in here? I know all these people." And I walked into the room and Carrie and the researcher she was working with presented this. They said, "Look, these 5 things, we think if we can fix them, we will get to where Natalia told us to get." Now, who's going to fix this? Can you guess what all of those product managers said? They said, "Nah, I mean, that sounds great, but like my team already presented our roadmap to leadership. We don't want to just go changing the roadmap now. They've already approved it." Some other folks said, that's not our feature area. That's not the initiative we were given to work on. That's not really our responsibility." One product team said, "Look, I'd love to fix this, but like there's so much coordination required to change this. Like this stuff is like there's like every team gets touched by this. I'd have to talk to marketing, executives would have some tough questions. It just feels like a lot of work to do." And Carrie looked around the room and she said, "You know what? I hear you. I think these are real concerns. Now, on the other hand, I will haunt all of you in your dreams until these things get fixed." And everyone burst out laughing because, she kind of broke the tension in that moment. She was like, look, our CPO has given us something and told us that this is what really matters. If we're building all this stuff, but more users are not getting value from our platform, then why are we doing any of this? Then there's going to come a certain time when all these features we've built are going to potentially be on the chopping block, and so are we as the teams that built them. And they did it. They did it. They got this stuff done. And there's so much I love about this story, but I wanted to kind of unpack four main points, which we're going to walk through today. Number one, there are always lots of good reasons not to take on high impact work. These reasons are real, right? It's not that all the people on these product teams were making this up. Like, it does require more coordination. It does often require changing your roadmap mid-flight. It does often invite a lot of scrutiny from executives. Doing high impact work is not easy, and we're usually not incentivized directly to do it. Number two, those high level goals can actually incentivize alignment and collaboration across product teams. The fact that this goal was at the level of users converting, not users using individual features, actually compelled folks to work across some of those silos when they wouldn't have had reason to do so otherwise. Number three, tying specific bits of work to impact level goals can help us prioritize work that actually matters. So Carrie found these five things. And when she went into that conversation, she was able to say, look, these five things are probably more important than the stuff you have on your roadmap. So let's talk about how we can prioritize these specific bits of work. Again, it's drawing that direct line between here's what we want to do, here's why it matters to the business. And last but certainly not least, the bravery and persistence of individual product team members can override the organization's formal structure, right? I have seen this time and time again. If you're waiting for the next reorg to fix things, you're going to be waiting maybe not that long because there might be another reorg happening right now. I have a friend who's on her fifth this year, but it's not going to change things. It is up to us as product team members to actually drive this change and to do so by being brave enough to take on work that is challenging and do things that are not easy to do. So let's talk about this first bit. There are always lots of good reasons not to take on high impact work. To illustrate this, I am going to do a fun little thought experiment. So we are all now building a car together. We are all now working in the automotive category. I know we are on Zoom, but imagine that we are all gathered together in the same place, and outside of this place, there is a car. Each of you is responsible when this meeting is over for stepping outside and making this car the best it can possibly be. You have two options. Number one, you can fine tune that engine. So, why do we use a car if we're going to use some jobs to be done parlance? Why do we hire a car to get us from point A to point B? And if you can make that engine smooth, if you can make it go fast, make it go easily, then it's going to be a great car. Now, of course, the downside is that you might also break the car, right? If your CEO happens to walk outside and the car's not running and your hands are in the engine, then you might have a really challenging conversation with that CEO. Now, here's your second option. I'm going to give you a glue gun and some rhinestones, and I'm going to ask you to make this car sparkle. You're going to make it beautiful. Now, of course, the risk here is like you're probably not going to make the car run any better, right? A bedazzled car still has the same engine as a non-bedazzled car. But the good news is every time your CEO walks outside, that car is only going to look prettier than it did before, right? If the CEO comes to check on the car and it's not running, you didn't have your hands in the engine. You didn't touch it. You're not the engine team. Someone else must have done something that really messed this up, but you've just been busy making the car prettier than it was before. Now imagine that some number of people here choose to do the rhinestones, right? Because they say, look, I don't want to be the person who has their hands in the engine, right? At the very least, if I do the rhinestones, I'm going to do no harm, right? I'm not going to make the car run smoother, but I'm also not going to make the car run worse. Now we have a whole team of people dutifully bedazzling this car. We go to start it up and we realize that the car won't start. No problem, right? We'll just lift the hood and fix the engine. But the problem is, all those rhinestones made the hood of the car so heavy that we can't lift it anymore. All that glue got stuck in the car, and now we can't actually access the thing we need to access to make the changes that matter. This, my friends, is what product development feels like in most modern organizations. We're adding more and more stuff to the hood of the car until we can't get to the engine anymore. This is a dynamic that I call the low impact death spiral, and it goes a little bit like this. Teams take on low impact work because it invites less scrutiny, because it's easier to do, because it's easier to celebrate, because it involves less coordination. As a result, we wind up with more complicated products. And if you use literally any product right now, you are probably experiencing this, right? A lot of modern products feel more like a collection of features than like an actual meaningful guided experience. Here's where things get really interesting. For each of those fiddly little features we've built, we now have to coordinate all of those features, right? Building things now means that each of those individual little low impact things we built needs to be taken into account. So to go back to that Mailchimp example, right? Suddenly, if we do want to change the onboarding flow, well, all the little features we built around that onboarding flow now need to be coordinated as well. The conflicts and dependencies that go into building anything meaningful get more and more multidimensional. We wind up with more meetings that we have to do. We wind up with more layers of governance and program management. And as a result of this, it is even harder to do high impact work. Important distinction there. We take on more low impact work because low impact work makes it easier to do more low impact work. You see why this is a spiral. We do low impact work, we add fiddly bits around the margins, the product gets more complicated product requires more internal coordination. More cost of internal coordination means we are more likely to do low impact work, and it keeps going. So that low impact work you're doing that feels like it's doing no harm, not only is it wasting the resources of your team, but it is probably wasting everybody's resources ultimately. It is driving us farther and farther down the low impact death spiral. What's interesting to me is that a lot of companies I work with, they see the conflicts and dependencies as the root cause, right? They're like, we have too many meetings. We don't have good program management. And it's like, yes, but the reason for that is that you have too many teams doing low impact work. I wish I had more folks coming to me saying the teams that seem like the highest performing teams, the teams with the most velocity who are shipping the most stuff are actually our biggest problem because now we have to deal with all that stuff they're shipping. That's not what they're coming to me saying. They're coming to me saying, we're too slow because we have all these meetings and we need better program management. In some cases, attempts to fix this make things worse, right? I've worked with companies that are like, we need to reorg, we need to add another layer of governance, we need to add more bureaucracy. That's not really the problem. So I share this with you, not to say like, wait for a reorg, because again, I don't think that solves the problem. I say this to point out that there are always real reasons to avoid high impact work. One team I worked with once described working on important things as invoking the eye of Sauron because suddenly all the executives will like cast their menacing stare upon you and start asking you, why are you doing this? What is this? Is this going to work? Give me a case for it. Um, there are real reasons to avoid high impact work, but there are also real consequences, right? There are consequences for your team. There are consequences for your product. There are consequences for your organization. This belief that doing low impact work does no harm is wishful thinking, and it's not true. Let's get to this point that high level goals can incentivize alignment and collaboration across teams. So I copied this with permission from Christina Wadka's book, Radical Focus. I would love to share this with you because I think that once you see it, you can't unsee it. In Radical Focus, she says most companies do things like the picture on the left, right? They cascade their company goal down to the department goal, down to the team goal, down to the team goal. They wind up with like 57 OKRs or 5,000 OKRs. They're like, oh, we have our level 11 OKRs and our level 10 OKRs and so on and so forth. And the question I usually ask them is like, okay, do your lowest level OKRs add up to your highest level OKRs? And they can never answer that question because they've cascaded things down so many levels that they have no idea if each team achieving its goals will actually add up to a successful business. That feels like an unacceptable level of risk to me. I tell folks, like, I am not judging you, but I am reflecting back that what you're saying to me is that you've spent 3 weeks setting team goals that, if achieved, may or may not make the business successful. That's where we are. What Christina Wadka suggests is that instead you think of the company goal as the center of gravity. And every other team goal or department goal or another team that has a different goal or no goal is just one step away from company goals. One why statement, one mathematical operator. We always play one step away from something that the business really cares about. And again, once you see this, you cannot unsee it. Whether you are doing OKRs or KPIs or North Star metrics, however you are setting your goals, if they are working well, they probably look more like the image on the right than like the image on the left. A lot of folks say to me here, well, you can't do that at enterprise scale. You can't do that with a big company. You can. And I think that at a big company scale, it's actually more important that each team understand why its work matters to the business at large. Now, what that means, of course, is that we are giving up this sense of control and accomplishment that comes from cascading down our goals until they are a list of features that each team can accomplish without working with other teams. But like, we should have to work with other teams, right? Like, product teams should have to work with marketing teams, should have to work with sales teams. If we want to achieve things that matter at an organizational level, we need to be willing to work across silos at an organizational level. Otherwise, we're just not going to do stuff that actually matters. So I worked with a company a while ago, a fairly large enterprise fintech company. So again, big company, this can work at big companies. And the way they had done things in the past was kind of like this, right? They had a company goal, which was like, I don't know, somebody said something in a town hall, there were bagels, I fell asleep. They had a department goal, which was something, something product excellence. These are my least favorite department goals. When it's like, our product department goal is to be an excellent product department. I'm like, wow, that's so helpful. I'll stop being a crap product department right away. Thank you for this critical guidance. Um, by the time you got to the team level, it was like ship some features, and then the individual team was like, "Yay, we shipped some features." This is what it usually looks like. But the company wanted to do things differently. They said, and this was before I started working with them and before I showed them this graphic, this was just naturally where this evolved. They were like, we need to be able to understand why the teams we have are delivering value for the business. So we've set a company goal of, let's call it 50 million additional in annual yearly revenue by the end of the year, right? We want this much more top line revenue coming in. It's what our investors care about. It's what we've promised the market. So, hey, team that used to build features, tell us how you're going to contribute to this. And the team was like, that is illegal. You cannot ask us that. It's not fair. There are too many dependencies. How can we be accountable for revenue? What if marketing doesn't market? What if sales doesn't sell? We can't do this ourselves, so we can't do it. So I had some conversations with them, which again kind of came back to this idea that, like, yeah, we are going to have to work with marketing. Yeah, we are going to have to work with sales. We are going to have to operate at the altitude that matters to the business if we want to do work that matters to the business. So I said, how are we going to contribute into this? They said, well, we don't know. We've just, honestly, it was easier when they gave us features to build because at least we could build them. And I said, okay, well, why did they give you these features to build? Why were you building all this stuff? They said, well, historically, we've been given products to build that expand the company's offering because much like Mailchimp, we are kind of trying to go from a single product company to a multi-product company. I just talked to someone else today who's going through this as well. And I said, well, why? Why does the business want that? And they said, well, because actually we have pretty good data showing that a multi-product user has a much higher customer lifetime value than a single product user. Oh, do we know how much more? They were like, yeah, we have a pretty solid sense of how much more. And from that, we can pretty confidently extrapolate out, like, in a year, how much more a multi-product user is worth than a single product user. Like, okay, so we can do kind of some apples to apples stuff here, right? Like, we can say if we convert X single product users to become multi-product users, there's approximately Y revenue on the line here for this year. Yeah? They said, yeah, we can do that. I said, great. So given how many people are at this table right now and how much you roughly get paid and what you think is possible, How many do we want to aim for? Like, how many single product users do we think we can convert in the year? And again, the room goes quiet. Like, we don't know exactly. Like, I don't want to know exactly. Just like, how many are we going to sleep well at night? And we kind of go back and forth. We're like, is it 1,000? Is it 100,000? We run some rough numbers, and we kind of land. We're like, 10,000 feels pretty good. Like, if we can get 10,000 users upgraded, that doesn't feel impossible given our user base overall. And it feels like it would have enough revenue impact that this team is not only making a good contribution this year, but like we're setting us up well to achieve future year revenue targets based on this customer lifetime value figure. And every conversation I had with the team from here on out came back to this number for the rest of the year, right? How are we driving this number? Again, I think part of the reason this number was able to drive that kind of decision making, was able to compel working across functions, was because it was just one step away from what the company really cared about, right? When company leadership was saying, why does this team matter? Um, they were able to answer that question. I had the CTO of this company pull me aside and say, the way this team talks about their work is entirely different. I feel like they've become so much more of a high performing team. And I said, like, the reality is they're not shipping any faster than they were before. They don't have any more velocity than before. They just know why the work they're doing matters, and they can tell you why they're prioritizing that work. So, in keeping with our takeaways, right, I'm not saying wait for your entire organization to change the way it sets its goals. I'm saying at the team level, think about your own goals differently. So, some questions you can ask. Are our team level goals no more than one step away from company level goals? Can we get there in one step, in one mathematical operator, in one why statement? Do our team goals involve specific enough timelines and targets to drive subtractive decision making? I'll talk about this in a moment. And finally, do our team goals contribute to company level goals enough to justify the company's investment in the team itself? Again, if you were the CEO, would you fund this team? These are the questions I like to start with at a team level. You can find these and more in the book. Buy my book GIF. Number 3, tying specific bits of work to impact level goals helps us prioritize work that actually matters. So again, as we go about the middle, right, as we go through whatever product development process or framework we use, as we take impact and come up with a strategy, do discovery, define problems, define scope, each of these steps adds risk, right? We run risk each time we add an intermediate step, that the work we do isn't actually going to add up to the impact we seek to drive. I think this is especially true as we get away from planning season or OKR season or whatever the heck we call it. I ask teams I work with often how their OKRs or their goals factor into their sprint planning, and they're like, they don't. They're totally separate things, which I'm genuinely wondering if like most of our delivery ceremonies need to be completely reimagined, because I am really struggling to get folks to think about impact as they go about scoping deliveries. It's another conversation entirely, but I'm thinking about this a lot. So if we go back to this team I worked with, right? About a month later, after planning season is over, this team at the fintech, one of the product managers comes to me and says, I need your help thinking about prioritization frameworks. Which is the best one? Should we use ICE? Should we use RICE? Should we use Moscow? And I'm like, I don't really care. Like, I'm not big on frameworks. Let's just have a conversation like humans about what you're thinking about building and why it matters. This product manager said, okay, um, would you mind if we did ICE? Because that's what I did. And I said, not at all. Like, that's great. I always am so happy when people take initiative and try something. So I was like, let's go through an ICE matrix and see how it works. And he says, cool, there are 3 features we could possibly build, A, B, and C. I went through this and A came out with the best score. So I think we'll do A first. I was like, that's great. Just walk me through your reasoning. He said, okay, well, the score for impact. I was like, hold on, what's this? What's the score? Like, what's us? What is a score? I was like, well, I scored them 1 to 10. I was like, okay, I hear you, but like, we have a goal, right? We have a goal of upgrading 10,000 single product users. So before we come up with an abstract score, just like what's the most users we could convert with each of these things, right? Like we have a team goal. Let's measure in the same unit because then we can actually say how likely we are to get there. He goes, okay, well, the first thing, I think is really good. We could do it entirely at our team level. We don't have to work too hard across functions. It's really, really high confidence, really, really low effort. It's just like perfect for us to build. I'm like, okay, great. Like, what's the impact? He goes, well, I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what it is. Our data team didn't do the right instrumentation, so we don't know, and it's impossible for me to answer that. It's something that touches the mobile website. I'm like, wait, the mobile app or it's like, the mobile website? It's like, how many people use the mobile? He's like, we don't know. We don't have exact. I'm like, okay, I don't want exact. Like, give me an order of magnitude. Like, how many people do you think are going to convert? Like, realistically, this doesn't need to be exact. Just give me a sense. He was like, I think we could easily, like no time and effort, just get 100 people converted right away. I'm like, cool. Thank you. That's what I asked. Second one. He's like, yeah, the second thing, like, it's going to be really hard. It would involve a lot of coordination across teams. We basically have to redesign the entire onboarding experience so that rather than like just making everyone a single product user, we're trying to find the people who would actually be good multi-product users right away and get them into a workflow that solves their needs immediately. And I was like, that sounds good. I like that. He's like, yeah, but like so many dependencies across teams. We need to work with marketing. There's not a lot we could do ourselves. Like, cool, that's great. What what's the impact? He's like, gosh, I don't want to overestimate it. I don't really want to do this. So let's say like 3,000 out of the gate. We could get 3,000 converted. I'm like, okay, cool. Thank you. He goes, the third one, like, we can do this one quickly. It's a landing page that nobody really hits. It's like 50 people max. I'm looking at this and I'm like, great. So, before we get into confidence and effort, it honestly feels like there's one thing here that's really worth doing, right? Like if we have a goal of 10,000, I don't think 100 is really worth even talking about right now, right? Like 100 is not going to get us any meaningful percentage of the way there, right? That's like what, 0.1%, 1%? It's 1%. It's like not, it's really not meaningful. And he goes, okay, I get it, but like it's an ice matrix. I really want to talk about confidence and effort. I want to score it. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll score it for you really quickly. Ready? There's your ice matrix. I don't care. Like, if we have one thing we could work on that has any chance in hell of getting us close to our goal, let's start there. I'm sure there will be lots of things for us to figure out about how to build it, when to roll it out, how to roll it out. Those are all going to be important things to talk about. But if it doesn't stand a chance in hell of delivering our goals, then let's never speak of it again. I share this example with you in part because I really encourage you to measure impact in the same unit as your most important goals. Don't get caught up in like scoring matrices. It's really easy. Again, like we spent a lot of time being like, oh, we're so clever. We can make scores. We can do matrices, but like have human conversations grounded in your goals, right? And this applies to those of you on supporting and operational teams as well. The folks who are like, but we have an internal customer. We can't do it. It's impossible. You might have excuses, but those excuses are not going to keep you safe. When Spotify laid off 17% of its workforce, their CEO said, we have too many people dedicated to supporting work and even doing work around the work rather than contributing to opportunities with real impact. If you are doing supporting work, it is really important that you are able to articulate the impact of that work. And if you are doing work that supports other teams, you might need to express that impact as a function of what those teams deliver. Emily Tate gave a great talk at Mind the Product this year about why you should care about internal product management. I highly recommend you find this talk. She said, lesson one, you don't own the metrics. So, for example, she works at a vet tech company. She said, software doesn't vaccinate pets, but we measure the success of our software in how many pets get vaccinated. We go to the teams and say, how could this help you achieve your metric? In the book, I talk about going to these customer facing teams or these teams that are closer to the business model and saying, what could you achieve with our support? What could you achieve without our support? How does our support, how do these things we could build help you deliver your goals? Last but not least, again, the bravery and persistence of individual product team members overrides the organization's formal structure. I'm going to share one more story with you. I worked with a team a while ago with a UK company that was prioritizing features for relaunching their whole ad tech platform. Big important thing. And I asked them, what goals are you working towards? And they said, Matt, I'm so glad you asked. Please refer to the attached OKR slide deck, which will tell you our goals. I said, I am not reading that. Tell me in one sentence, what does success look like? How will the business know if this was successful? They said, Matt, I'm so glad you don't like slide decks. We don't like them either. That's why we made a Miro board, which has our real goals. There's like 30 of them. And someone else in the team said, wait, I also have a Miro board. So there were 2 Miro boards in a slide deck. I would not read any of these. So we did a workshop. This is one of my favorite pictures because this guy to my right is just like so not buying whatever I'm saying. He's just like not convinced at all. This was taken at Lisbon 2 years ago. So we did a workshop. Subtracting, subtracting, subtracting. We have 10 goals. Let's make it 9. 9, let's make it 8. What does the business really care about? Why is the business relaunching this ad tech platform? Why is the business paying the salaries of all the people in this room? And we wound up with 2 options. Number 1, build an excellent, amazing, stupendous platform to increase our team's profits by 20% in the next financial year. Or build a seamless, wonderful platform to increase our team's profits from £20 million to £100 million in the next financial year. These look similar, but they're quite different. One is a 20% increase. The other is a 500% increase. And you know who the hero of this story is? The person who said 20%. I'll tell you why. I asked that person, like, how did you come up with 20%? And they said, I don't know. It just sounded good. 20%, like, I feel good about that. And someone else in the room said, it's funny. I heard that person say 20% and I remembered 20. Like 20 rang a bell, but I thought it wasn't 20%. It was something else. And I went and looked up our VP's talk at the town hall last month. And sure enough, our VP said that we would go from £20 million to £100 million the next financial year. The hero of the story is the person who was brave enough to say the wrong number first. And honestly, a lot of my work with product teams is creating a space where people feel brave enough to say the wrong number first. Because until there is a real number for us to look at, we don't know if it's the right number or the wrong number. So sure enough, it turns out their VP had made this promise that in the next financial year, we would go from £20 million to £100 million. Everyone started freaking out. But then somebody said, no, we don't need to freak out because this is the next financial year. That's like 10 years from now. It's cool. We're still making Miro boards. Like no one's giving us any pressure. We can just like take our time. It's cool. So I did an exercise that I love to do. I just made a timeline on a whiteboard. I was like, it's March of 2025. By March of 2026, you need £100 million of profits, 80 million's new. What else should go on this timeline? They're like, do we do outcomes? Do we do outputs? Do we do? I'm like, just tell me something that goes on the timeline. Like, what's another date that's important? Somebody said, well, in October, we launched the new platform. Like, okay, cool. So if we don't launch until October, what happens between now and then? How much profits do we make? They're like, we make about 10 million. Like, cool. So again, no judgment. What you are telling me is that between October of 2025 and March of 2026, you will bring in 90 million pounds of profits. Again, I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just telling you what you're telling me in different words. Here's where things get really interesting. Suddenly they said, wait a second. We can't wait till October. We've got to get stuff out into the market sooner. We've got to monetize some smaller features. We've got to come up with a strategy. When are we moving people over? Do we move everyone over? Do we try to monetize new audiences? Suddenly, all those strategic conversations that good product teams have became a need to have, not an abstract nice to have, right? Suddenly, all these things we talk about in terms of fail fast, do discovery, learn about your customers, they needed to do this because if they didn't do it, they did not have a chance in hell of achieving their most important goal. And I am so happy to tell you, I caught up with the leader of this team a while ago, and she told me that they started shipping in June. that after they had this conversation, they actually said, like, look, we are not comfortable waiting until October. We need to start getting things into the market sooner. And again, this wasn't leadership bearing down on them. This was the team saying, look, if we are going to be a good team, if we're going to be a good investment, we need to put a little more pressure on ourselves. We need to get things to market sooner. We need to be having these conversations even when the business isn't asking us. I want to leave you on this note. Like, the power is within all of you. I gave a talk at UX Brighton a couple years ago called You Don't Get Anyone to Do Anything. And I shared a quote from Alan Watts in there about the moment we wait for someone else to do something, the moment we say we can't do anything, we have to control them and get them to do something, we actually give up most of our own power. I have seen it time and time again in so many product organizations I've worked with. The most meaningful changes, the ability to hit that ambitious revenue target, the ability to increase those conversions by a specific amount comes from the conversations we have at the team level. So I hope I've given you some conversations to start. Again, the book is full of conversations you can have at the team level, conversation starters, examples, stories, case studies. Um, You can find me. I'm pretty easy to find online at mattlemay.com. There's a link tree also. I don't know if this works, but I can like hold up my little QR code. Probably doesn't work. Um, that's my spiel.
Those,
Ask me.
thank you so much, Matt. That was fantastic. I've shared your links in the chat, and I will share them again. See a lot of people loving your talk, obviously, much as I did. We've already got a couple of questions through. I don't know if you saw them from Dipayan. So I can maybe I'll read out one of those and give everyone a moment to process. And yeah, if they want to ask another question, they can stick those in the chat as well. So
Perfect.
question one, many teams genuinely intend to drive business impact, but end up optimizing for local metrics, activation,
Yes.
velocity, or adoption, that signal progress without actually creating it. So obviously you talked a lot about this. In your experience, what are the most reliable leading indicators that a team is truly aligned with impact and not just activity? And how can leaders systematically reinforce this alignment without resorting to top-down KPIs?
I'm so glad you asked that. I have largely moved away from using the term leading and lagging, and I want to tell you why. In different companies with different business models, the same metric can be lagging versus leading. So, like if you're working with a B2B company with a long sales cycle, revenue is like a very lagging metric. I've worked with one company that builds physical equipment, and they were like, yeah, we write a product spec, and then a year and a half later, we start selling it. So, that's obviously a very lagging metric. There's no way you could look at that and say, how is our revenue today? When you work with a company like Spotify, you can look at subscribers on a daily basis, right? That feedback loop is really, really short. So, what I found is helpful is rather than saying what's leading and what's lagging, saying like, what do we need to measure and what is the cadence at which we can measure it for this business? And from there, what else can we measure on a shorter cadence if we need to? So, get really specific about the metrics and the cadences because it depends so much on the business you work for, on what you're trying to measure. So that example I shared with you, where I kind of looked at a big thing, a big timeline, and it was like, all right, here's, what we need to do by March of 2026. What can we do before then? What should we see before then? I really like doing it that way. Just being like, okay, if the company is measuring success with a lagging indicator in a year, what do we want to see in the next quarter? What do we want to see 2 quarters from now? When can we measure it? So have that conversation as specifically as possible to your particular team, your particular business model. Put it on a timeline, and see what proxies you can measure that you feel best about.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really clear. I love that. Second question. You've spoken a lot about using constraint design to help teams focus on what matters. In practice, how can product leaders design the right kind of constraints, the ones that unlock creativity and focus, rather than the kind that feel like artificial limits or control mechanisms?
I think the best constraints are not terribly smart. I think what becomes smart is how you work within the constraints. So I'm actually doing a talk on this next week at the um, interaction design group, where I'm talking about one pagers and using one pagers within different platforms. So like when I work in Miro, for example, Miro is a platform I really love for its collaborative capacity. It's also really easy for things to expand indefinitely. What I usually do is just create a one page frame in any Miro canvas. And I'm like, okay, what goes on the page is what we commit to. Everything else is not what gets committed to. I'm a big believer. I have my whole little side project. If you go to onepageonehour.com, that's my little side project where I get people to commit to spending no more than one page in 1 hour on something before they share it with their team. Um, I think sometimes being like, what are the three goals we care about the most? Even if we wind up with five or one or two, it should never be more than five. Sometimes just having like brute force constraints is the best way to do things because then we don't debate the constraints. Then we don't try to outsmart ourselves with the constraints. We just use really simple, basic constraints to force subtractive thinking. So I am actually a big, big fan of unsmart constraints because they force smart thinking.
Very nice. Yeah, this question really resonated with me. I used to work in the games industry, and we had the mantra, creativity loves constraints. So I'm a big believer of it too. So those are the questions we had in the chat so far. Um, Anyone else? If you have your question, you can dump it in the chat. You can stick your hand up. We'll see what happens. We're pretty much out of time anyway. So, oh, another question from Lisa. What is the one thing I can do or say as a product leader to convince management of the impact-driven approach and avoid bypassing the process, sorry.
Ooh. I mean, I think the trick is there's no one thing you can do or say. It's a practice and it takes time. And again, it takes that subtraction. I think one of the hardest things to do as a product leader, I've experienced this with a lot of product leaders I work with. One of the hardest things to do is to say like, I'm glad you put together these 25 goals, but I just want one. Or like, I'm glad you put together this slide deck. I don't want a slide deck. Um, Really asking like it's as much in the conversations you refuse to have as the conversations you do have. And I think as a product leader, there's a real weird emotional shift that goes with that. But I think if you can do it firmly but caringly and say like, I actually like I need you to commit to this and you have my support, but I'm glad you came up with these five options. Come back with three and a recommendation. I don't want to spend a lot of time debating this. Um, Using those constraints at a leadership level, I often tell people in product leadership that if you can have clear goals, clear guardrails, and short feedback loops, there's a whole chapter about that in product management and practice, right? Be clear about what success looks like, be clear about the tactical guardrails and constraints. And then rather than having your team go spend a month making a deck, say, spend an hour coming up with something and then let's review it together. Those short feedback loops are really powerful from a leadership standpoint.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to bring things to a close there then, as we're pretty much at time anyway. Matt, thank you so much for coming and chatting to us. Really enjoyed your talk. And just as a quick reminder to everyone, recording of this talk will be going up on YouTube shortly. And we have a bunch more talks upcoming as well if you check out our Luma page. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great evening and hopefully see you soon.
Thanks so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Take care. Keep in touch.